Okay, today we're going to look at the second topic in the Edexcel GCSE spec, which is influences on taking part in sport. Make sure you've got your note sheet ready with you so you can make notes as the presentation goes along. Remember to pause and rewind at any point that you want to go back and check information. So that's what we're going to look at today. But first of all, I just want us to think about ourselves and think about what has influenced you to play your sport. So if you play football, why do you play it? If you play basketball, why have you played it? Have you been influenced by anything when you were younger or anything when you've grown up for you to play that sport? And I've picked out an example of Usain Bolt because obviously he's a famous sports person. And I'm going to just look at very quickly the reasons why he is actually a 100-metre sprinter. And if you think to Usain Bolt growing up and his background, it's quite obvious as to why he actually became an Olympic sprinter. Usain Bolt was born obviously in Jamaica. And Jamaica as a country has a strong tradition of creating successful athletes in sprint events on the track, whether it's 100, 200 or the relay. And obviously Usain Bolt growing up in that country would have been influenced by the media and things like that. If you look closely again at Usain Bolt's upbringing, he actually come from a very deprived background, not having a lot of money. And to do 100 metres, really you do only need a 100-metre space to run into, so running is really cost effective. It doesn't cost a lot of money, so that would have been a big influence on why he took part in athletics as well. One of the other influences as well, when he was growing up, he went to a primary school, and just around the corner from his primary school there was actually an athletics track, and that was one of the facilities that he was able to use growing up. And obviously being around the athletics track from an early age influenced him to take up and become good at sprinting as well. And also his secondary school sports coach, athletics coach, helped to organise the Jamaica national competition for the youth games. And obviously Usain Bolt, being in close contact with him, was able to get some specific coaching as well. So Usain Bolt growing up was around a lot of close things that influenced him in order to take part in the 100 metres. And we're going to look at today how different influences can influence young people in England or wherever in the world to take part in different sports. And I encourage you to think about how you're influenced to take part in your sport too. So for your GCSE exam, you need to know these main influences. So just make sure you take time to jot these down. And a really simple way to remember them is just by remembering CRISPy. And that's a really simple acronym to help you remember them. So the first one is cultural factors. And we've got health and well-being, resources, image, socio-economic and people. And we're going to look closely at how those influence different people in different sports. So these are the influences in a bit more detail, and what you need to take away from this for your exam is you need to understand how these influences actually influence participation in sport. And I'll just very briefly go through some of them and give some examples as well. Make sure you take note of these because it's important that you take this for your exam. So the first one is cultural factors. Your ethnic background, your sex, your gender or your race can influence what sport you play. So for example, if you look in England alone, the most popular sport is football, and it's deep within the culture of England to play football, and many people in England, many young boys play football because it's our national sport, if you like. If you go to somewhere like India or Pakistan, cricket is their national sport, and there's no wonder why you see lots of people playing cricket in that country. If you go to America, you may see lots of people playing American football, basketball and baseball, and they are sports synonymous with their country and their culture. Health and well-being. Lots of people take part in sport obviously to improve their health and well-being, but a lot of people are influenced by that and it causes them to play certain sports. So for example, you see a lot of people who take part in disability sports are obviously playing those sports because of their disability. Resources, and this is key, and I talk about Usain Bolt. The availability of certain resources will affect what sport you play. In a lot of deprived areas, you don't tend to see people playing sports that cost a lot of money to hire equipment and use equipment. And you tend to see a lot of so-called affluent sports where they cost a lot of money for equipment that are usually played by the upper class, if you like, and that still happens today. So a lot of the sports that you may play, you may play them purely because it was actually quite cheap to play. I myself played football when I was growing up because it was cheap. I only needed a pair of football boots and a ball, and I was able to play it. So the resources can influence the type of sport that you play as well. Image, that's a big factor in what sport you play as well and what sport you participate in. If we look back a few years ago when England actually won the Rugby World Cup, there was a massive increase in the amount of young people playing rugby. and it was purely because there was huge media coverage. A lot of people will be influenced by role models as well. There may have been a certain sports person that was very famous that has influenced you to play your sport. And I encourage you to think about some of the people that maybe have been your role models and think about why they've influenced you to play. Socio-economic, and I go back to Usain Bolt, quite often the amount of money that you have can influence what sport you play. And that has a big impact on participation. And some sports are literally too expensive, and that's sometimes why they have low participation rates. And the final one there, people. And quite often when I speak to a lot of people in our classes, it's about, they say they're influenced by somebody who took them to their sport. So for example, the reason I played football when I was a young kid was because my mate's dad wanted to run a football team. So my mate's dad was a big influence on me playing football. You may have a similar story where somebody's influenced you. Quite often it's family or friends that influence you to play certain sports. So take time to know those different influences and make sure for your exam you can think of examples of that as well. Obviously we all participate in sport, but there are also different ways that we can participate in sport, and we're going to look in a minute at different levels that we can participate at. Now these are the three main roles that you need to know for your exam. They are obviously being a participant, being a coach, or being an official. So you may participate in a sport, but you may just be an official or a coach. You may not be physically active in that sport. And these are different roles that people can participate in. I've got a couple of pictures here of, we have in our school alone some people who referee mini soccer tournaments. We have some people who are involved in coaching. And they are the three main roles. So make sure you can think about them when you think about participation. Don't just think of them in terms of playing sport. There's also those other three roles. And you can do those either professionally where you're paid, or you can do them as a volunteer as well. And the government has a big drive on a lot of volunteers running youth sport and getting participation levels up. And this is the participation pyramid, and this just basically demonstrates the different levels that you can participate in sport, whether you be a participant, a coach, or maybe an official as well. And you need to know these 4 levels of participation and be able to give examples for each level as well. And I encourage you to think about what level you think you're at. So we've got, going from the bottom to the top, we've got foundation level, participation level, performance level, and excellence level. Now this is really important when we think in terms of our top athletes in the country. The wider the base, the more people we have participating. And obviously the more people we have participating, the more chance we've got of creating some of the top athletes in sport today. That's why quite often in the media you'll see a lot of drive from the government to get lots of people improving their health and fitness and participating in sport so that we can have this increase at the top level. Now I'll go into detail about these for you now. So we'll start at the bottom like we did on the last slide. We've got the foundation level, and this is where participants are first experienced in sports, learning basic skills, maybe in the P lessons or maybe in multi-sport sessions. And this is at the bottom where it's about increasing health and fitness and awareness of sports. Then we've got the participation level, and this is quite often where people will play sport for fun, but they may do it on a weekly basis either at a sports club or a fitness session at a local gym. And again, they're doing it purely for enjoyment and to increase their fitness. As we go higher up the pyramid, you get less people performing at these levels, and you've got performance level, and this is where you're focusing on developing specific skills, either as part of a team or a club, and you may be competing competitively as well. So if you're part of a team that's in a league on a weekend, you're at the performance level where you're trying to improve at your training sessions on a weekly basis, and you're preparing people to go to the next level, which is the excellence or the elite level. So at the top of the pyramid, this is where the least amount of people play. It's sometimes called the elite level or the excellence level, and it's where people compete at a national or a professional standard. So if you think about your people who play for professional sports clubs, the top of the pyramid, that's where they would be, or your Olympic athletes. So if you think about the natural progression through the pyramid, people would start at the bottom and with the aim of some people working towards the top. So make sure you know each of those levels in detail. Right, just to bring it all back together for this topic, we were looking at the influences on participation in sport. Make sure that you know what the main influences are. So remember CRISPy as an acronym. Think about what has influenced you to play sport. Make sure you know the 3 different roles involved in sport. And finally, make sure you know each of the different levels on our participation pyramid. Make sure you can describe each level and give examples, and think about where you fit in there as well. Make sure you bring your notes to the next lesson. Go back, rewind, go back, check over, make sure you get some of the keywords, and make sure you bring, like I said, your notes to your next lesson. Thank you.